History books usually stick to the big stories. Wars, kings, revolutions, but scattered throughout the past are events so strange and unsettling they read more like horror stories than reality. Most people don't even know they happened, and yet they shaped the lives of entire generations. Today we're going to bring those forgotten nightmares back into the light. On the island of Öland in Sweden sits the ruins of Sandby Borg, an Iron Age ring fort. For centuries, locals avoided the site, whispering that it was cursed. Archaeologists now know why. Around the late 5th century, the fort's entire population was slaughtered. Excavations revealed families killed inside their homes, skeletons lying where they fell. Nothing was looted. Weapons, jewelry, even livestock were left untouched, as if attackers wanted the place to remain frozen in time. For more than 1,000 years, no one resettled the fort. It became a literal ghost village, avoided by locals who sensed something unnatural had happened here. To this day, we don't know who carried out the massacre or why. All that remains is an eerie silence, as though the land itself remembers the horror. The early 20th century brought one of the coldest rivalries in history. Who would be the first to reach the South Pole? Two men led the charge, Norwegian Roald Amundsen and British explorer Robert Falcon Scott. Amundsen's team used dog sleds, moved quickly, and planted the Norwegian flag at the pole in December 1911. Scott, however, took a slower route with ponies and motor sledges. By the time his team arrived in January 1912, they were devastated to find the flag already there. The return journey was a nightmare. Facing frostbite, starvation, and blizzards, Scott and his companions all perished in their tent just 11 miles from a supply depot. When their frozen bodies were discovered months later, Scott's diary told the grim tale of their slow decline. The South Pole race became not just an adventure story, but a real tragedy that reads like the climax of a survival horror novel. In 1897, Swedish engineer Salomon August André had a bold idea. Why not drift across the Arctic Ocean in a giant hydrogen balloon? He believed it would be faster than sleds and safer than ships. Spoiler alert, it was not. Andre and his two companions launched from Svalbard, Norway. Almost immediately, the balloon began leaking gas and crashing into the icy wasteland. For weeks, the three men stumbled across the Arctic, leaving behind eerie journals describing frostbite, exhaustion, and desperation. They eventually disappeared. Their remains weren't discovered until 1930, more than 3 decades later, perfectly preserved along with their photographs and diaries. The recovered records read like a horror story written in real time, the optimism of a bold plan unraveling into tragedy under the endless polar night. Not all horror stories are disasters. Some are deliberate. In the mid-18th century, the Qianlong Emperor of the Qing dynasty in China gave a chilling order: the complete extermination of the Dzungar people. The Dzungar, a Mongol ethnic group living in what is now Xinjiang, had resisted Qing rule throughout repeated uprisings. Finally, the emperor declared that the Dzungar had proven themselves too troublesome to be allowed to live. He commanded his generals not to accept any surrender, claiming that any plea for mercy was just a trick. What followed was a campaign of extermination that wiped out much of the Dzungar population through killings, famine, and disease. Modern historians describe it as one of the clearest cases of genocide in early modern history. Entire communities were erased from the map, leaving a silence that still lingers in Central Asia today. Picture this. It's the 1920s and no one has ever stood on the roof of the world. Before oxygen tanks, high-tech gear, or GPS mapping, the first climbers to attempt Mount Everest faced a mountain that might as well have been another planet. In 1924, George Mallory and Andrew Irving made their infamous attempt. They were last spotted climbing high on the northeast ridge, less than 1,000 feet from the summit, before clouds swallowed them whole. They never came back down. Their disappearance haunted explorers for decades. Mallory's body wasn't discovered until 1999, perfectly preserved by the ice, still wearing his climbing gear. No one knows if they reached the top before they died, but the mountain kept their secret. Imagine vanishing into the world's deadliest peak only to reappear 75 years later, as if time had frozen. It's history with the chill of a ghost story. The French Revolution promised liberty, equality, and fraternity, but it also delivered one of the most terrifying chapters in European history. Between 1793 and 1794, during the Reign of Terror, France's revolutionary leaders turned the guillotine into a symbol of both justice and fear. Tens of thousands were executed for alleged disloyalty, including nobles, priests, and even ordinary citizens accused by neighbors. In some regions, people weren't just beheaded, they were drowned in mass in rivers like the Loire. The entire country lived in paranoia, knowing a careless word could end with a march to the scaffold. The Sanson family, executioners of Paris for generations, later published memoirs describing their work. Reading them today feels like flipping through the journals of a grim reaper. The Enlightenment had promised progress, but for those living in revolutionary France, it was survival in a world that had turned into a real-life horror show. In the 20th century, Romania's dictator Nicolae Ceaușescu created a reign of terror that felt ripped from a dystopian novel. He built a personality cult so extreme that his face appeared on everything, from coins to textbooks, while his people suffered under shortages of food, medicine, and even electricity. By 1989, the Romanian people had had enough. Protests erupted and Ceaușescu tried to rally the crowds with one last speech, but instead of cheering, they booed him on live television. A sound he had never heard before. Within days, Ceaușescu and his wife Elena were captured. On Christmas Day, they were put on trial by a hastily formed tribunal, accused of crimes against the people, and executed by firing squad. The fall of his regime was sudden, shocking, and chaotic, like the abrupt end of a dictator's horror story playing out on the world stage. Imagine being in Rome at the height of its power, only to watch it crumble under a sickness no one understood. Between 165 and 180 CE, the Antonine Plague swept through the empire, killing millions. Contemporary accounts describe victims with fevers, black sores, and unbearable thirst. Whole towns were depopulated. Soldiers died by the thousands, crippling Rome's legions. Even Emperor Marcus Aurelius couldn't escape its grip, recording in his writings how the empire itself seemed poisoned. Historians debate whether it was smallpox or measles, but either way, the Antonine Plague left Rome reeling. Streets filled with uncollected corpses, funeral pyres smoked day and night, and panic spread across the empire. It was an ancient pandemic that felt like the wrath of the gods, and it nearly broke the world's greatest superpower of the time. Over 4,000 years, the Akkadian Empire ruled Mesopotamia. Then, almost as quickly as it had risen, it fell apart in what can only be described as one of the earliest apocalyptic collapses. According to a surviving Sumerian text, King Niram's sin angered the gods by defiling a temple. The punishment was catastrophic: droughts, crop failures, invasions, and plague. Archaeology backs this up. Around 2200 BCE, records show trade routes collapsed, cities were abandoned, and skeletal remains revealed famine-stricken populations. To the people of the time, it must have felt like the end of the world. Their empire didn't just fall, it evaporated, leaving behind only broken walls, scattered bones, and a chilling story etched in clay tablets that reads like a curse. You don't usually think of beer as deadly, but in London in 1814 it became a killer. At the Mew and Company Brewing, a massive vat holding over 300,000 gallons of beer suddenly ruptured. The wave that followed tore through nearby streets, collapsing walls and filling cellars. Several people drowned, unable to escape basements that filled with beer faster than they could climb out. Newspapers described the scene as both tragic and bizarre. Rescue workers struggling while bystanders tried to scoop up free beer with pots and pans. The neighborhood smelled of alcohol for weeks. Today, it almost sounds like a grim parody, a flood of beer sweeping through a city like something from a dark folktale, but it was very real, and for the victims, it was definitely no laughing matter. All right, guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I have been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye!